Hello and welcome to the next 6 months. Now, every day it seems as if there's an avalanche of news out there, and we thought it would be a good idea just to step back a little bit and look at some of the mega forces that are shaping our world. Will things ever get back to normal? Now, here to help me is management guru and author of 99%, Mark Thomas. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Peter.
So,
how are you?
I'm all right, actually, strangely enough. I don't know if I'm going to be all right in the next 6 months. We'll find out quite soon. So let's find out, for a start, who you are and what made you write this book.
Well, I've spent most of my career advising businesses on how to grow, how to plan their strategy for the future, and how to grow their profits sustainably. And while I was doing that, I started to analyze questions initially of country stability, and then I began to look at the issue of rising inequality in the US and the UK. And when I looked at the data, I knew there was a bit of an issue, but I was shocked as I began to analyze it to realize what it implied. And in the end, I decided it made sense for me to stop consulting and actually finish the research and write the book, and indeed to set up 99% organization.
So you were doing research for big governments and for big corporations. Basically, am I right in saying you were forecasting the future, or is that not the right word to use?
It's not really the right word, because most of the time what is going to happen is unpredictable because it depends on decisions that people take. So, for example, in this country, if somebody puts out a graph that says this is what's going to happen with the coronavirus over the next 6 months, it doesn't make sense as a forecast, because actually what's going to happen depends on a number of decisions, like, do we have a lockdown? Is it compulsory to wear masks? Those sorts of issues will affect it. Sure. So you can do a scenario that says if we don't lock down, what would happen? But you can't say this is definitely what will happen.
So let's pull back for a moment and just look at some of the big forces that have been shaping our world over the past few decades, basically the reason we are living the sort of world we're living in right now. What do you say those forces are?
As you say, it makes sense to step back from the detail. You started by saying we're deluged with exciting news every day, and we are, and that blinds us to what's been happening over a longer time frame. So let's take some really big chunks of time, 35-year chunks. So the first of those 35-year chunks is the period from the end of the Second World War up to 1980. And most countries in the world performed extremely strongly in that period. Both their economies overall performed strongly, and the experience of a typical individual was much better. So they all had a name for it. Many countries called it the economic miracle. The French called it les Trente Glorieuses. And in the UK and the US, we both called it the Golden Age of Capitalism.
Golden Age of Capitalism, right.
The Golden Age of Capitalism. And different people date the end of it slightly differently, but I've chosen to work in 35-year chunks. And the next 35-year chunk is the 35 years that starts in 1980 and ends in 2015. And then, of course, the big question is what's going to happen to the chunk that we're just in the beginning of now, which is the chunk from 2015 up to 2050. We don't know the answer to the third one, but we do know what happened in the first two chunks. And it's really quite stark.
So so I've got these two ideas in my head here. We've got the Golden Age of Capitalism, the first 35-year chunk up to about 1980, and the second chunk up to about 2015. What do you call that?
Yes. I've called that the age of market capitalism, because there was a different philosophy of government in many countries, and specifically there was in the US and the UK. In both of those, both the US and the UK, there was a change. Reagan was elected in 1980 and Thatcher in 1979. So that was the beginning of a change from seeing government as part of the solution to people's problems to a view which Reagan expressed very pithily when he said, well, government isn't the solution, government is the problem.
I remember that,
Since then, the emphasis has been on getting rid of government, lowering taxes, therefore lowering public spending, reducing regulations as far as possible, and freeing up markets to do what they can do. And the idea, at least the idea at the beginning, was that that would produce faster growth and be good for everybody.
Okay.
We can have a look at the stats in a minute, and we can see what actually happened, because it wasn't that. Oh, well, here we are. So if we look at that graph, the top bar, the gold bar, of course, represents the golden age of capitalism. And the blue bar represents what happened during the second big chunk of time, the era of market capitalism. Okay. So the first couple of bars, you can see that's the size of the US economy, which was growing at over almost 4% per annum. And then it was growing at less than 3% per annum during market capitalism. And a similar sort of picture with the UK. And the same if you look at it on a per head basis. So the economies didn't spring forward, they actually started to grow more slowly. And that's true with other countries around the world as well. They've also grown more slowly in that era of market capitalism than they did before. But the really important bit for people is, what do I get paid? Have I got a job or not? And you can see a stark difference there, in particular in the US, where up until 1980, wage growth was very healthy, but since then it's been fairly close to zero. So they've had almost 40 years now with very little wage growth at all. Slightly different picture in the UK. We haven't got median household income data, but we can also look at unemployment, where unemployment was generally fairly low during the Golden Age, and it's been vastly higher, in particular in the UK. If you look at the chart, it's scary how much higher unemployment has been in the last 30 years.
So I'm beginning to feel that everything I knew is suddenly not right anymore, because my understanding was that, with the age of market capitalism, the market can never be wrong, the market never lies, the market will look after us. But actually what you're saying is, by independent analysis of just looking at the facts, we are not as well off as we were during the Golden Age. Am I right?
Well, not exactly. So in the US, there are actually quite a few people who are poorer than they were in 1980, because the household income growth has been so low in the States. In the UK, most people are better off than they were in 1980, but they're worse off than they were in 2007. And that's an unprecedented period for the UK.
Okay, so there's a trend. There's a trend there. All right, and so
downward trend,
there's a downward trend. So what we normally expect as part of the sort of the natural order of things is that, if you've got children, you expect your children to do better than you do, and to have better jobs and to earn more money, and just life goes on like that, and it's good natural progression. Are you saying that's no longer the case?
Exactly. That is the single thing that shocked me most when I started doing this analysis, because, like you, I had assumed that was a kind of law of nature, that each new generation would be better off than the previous generations. And in my own family, it had been true for generations that was the case. So when my children were born, I assumed that their opportunities would be greater than those that were open to me, just as mine had been compared with my parents. And then when I started to do this analysis, I realized, no, that does not have to be the case. This law of nature has been suspended. And if we simply project ahead, if we assume that today's trends continue for that third block of time, and we look to 2050, then we get to a state where a lot of people in the UK are living in poverty or not very far above poverty, when what we should be looking at is a world where people are living much more comfortable lives than today. So we need to change track.
We need to change things. Okay, so I've got dozens more questions to ask you, Mark, but we want to keep these shows nice and short and sweet. We're going to be with you in any case every day for the next 6 months, for the next month. If you've got questions or comments you want to make, particularly questions to Mark, you can do it right here on YouTube in the comments section underneath, and we'll look at them and we'll relay them to Mark. More from Mark and me tomorrow.